Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. In reflex, Aubrey looked down at her arm in a cast before returning her gaze to Roxanne as if it was nothing. My injury isn't a big deal. I was accidentally clipped by a car while out shopping with Mrs. Farwell 2 days ago. Luckily, she was unhurt. Aubrey was clearly hinting that she hurt herself in an attempt to save Sonia. Roxanne, having read between the lines, cracked a flat smile and replied in a cursory tone, "Miss Pearson, since you enjoy such a close relationship with Mrs. Farwell, I'm sure it will be smooth sailing for you once you marry into the Pearson family. If there's nothing else, I need to leave first as it's getting late and the children are tired." Before Aubrey could respond, Roxanne turned to leave. No sooner had she done that than she felt someone grabbing her wrist. Knitting her brows, she turned around to look at Aubrey. Aubrey returned the gaze with a pathetic expression. "Actually, there's something else I want to say. I owe you an apology." Having heard those words, Roxanne was suddenly aroused with suspicion, unaware of what Aubrey was scheming. "That's not necessary." Roxanne pursed her lower lip. "Miss Pearson, there's nothing for you to apologize for." Even though Aubrey had done plenty to harm her and her boys prior to that, she didn't need the former's apology. After all, a single apology could never make up for all of Aubrey's past misdeeds. Besides, she had decided to draw the line with Lucian, ending any future interaction with him and Aubrey. She would also be relieved as long as both of them don't cause her any trouble moving forward. In spite of that, Aubrey, adamant about her apology, continued to hold Roxanne's wrist tightly. It was an impulsive mistake of mine to have gotten the boys expelled from their school previously. Just thinking about your relationship with Lucian from 6 years ago is enough to fill me with fear of him returning to your side. That's why I came up with the idea to put some distance between the two of you. It was indeed wrong of me to harm the children. Hence, will you forgive me for doing so?" Even though she could feel the mockery in Aubrey's words, Roxanne gave her a nonchalant nod. "Fine, I forgive you as long as you don't harm Archie and Benny ever again. On top of that, there's nothing for you to worry about, for you're the one that Lucian fancies all this while. There has never been the possibility of him returning to my side. Thus, there's no need for you to keep hounding me relentlessly." With that, Roxanne was in no mood to continue the conversation any further. Realizing that Aubrey still refused to let her go, Roxanne, with furrowed brows, raised her hand to pry her wrist free of Aubrey's grip. Unexpectedly, the moment her hand made contact with Aubrey's, the latter suddenly let go and stumbled a step before leaning against the wall on her side. Roxanne's expression darkened at the thought of Aubrey's injury. "What are you doing?" After regaining her balance by supporting herself off the wall, Aubrey couldn't help but be stunned by Roxanne's words. Subsequently, she gave Roxanne a confused look. Excuse me. Since I hurt my arm, I have had trouble maintaining my center of gravity. That's why I lost my balance easily." Aubrey had barely finished and didn't wait for Roxanne to respond when she continued in a considerate tone, "I'm fine, and also heartened by your forgiveness. Didn't you mention that the children need rest? You should hurry and take them home now." With that, Aubrey ended the conversation with a cordial smile before returning to the corridor. As Roxanne watched Aubrey's leaving silhouette, a niggling sense of dread descended upon her. Nonetheless, she couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Since Aubrey herself claimed to be fine, Roxanne didn't give the matter much thought as she headed downstairs to drive the children home. Upon emerging from the stairwell, Aubrey, with a drastic change in her expression, hurriedly walked into the washroom. Gritting her teeth, she gently knocked her plaster-casted arm against the wall. The impact was instantly followed by her face writhing in agonizing pain. When she subsequently checked the time and saw that it was the usual hour for Sonia's visit, Aubrey rushed back up the stairs to her ward. The tremendous pain in her arm, plus climbing 6 to 7 flights of stairs in a single breath, caused Aubrey to be covered in sweat upon returning to her ward. Lucian, who was waiting inside, was about to call her when he heard the commotion beyond the door. After watching Roxanne leave with the children, he went to the orthopedic department to look for Aubrey. When he didn't find her there, he decided to return to her ward, where she was still nowhere to be seen. "Lucian, you're back." There was a hint of desolation in her voice. Lucian simply nodded. "Where did you go?" Aubrey pursed her lips into an awkward smile. "After leaving the orthopedic department, I headed to the pediatric department, thinking that you were there. Since I couldn't find you, I inquired with the doctor about Ms. Jarvis' son's condition with the hope that I could be of some assistance." Without dwelling too much on her response, Lucian flatly replied, "If she needs any help, she'll naturally voice it out." Despite his answer, Lucian was cognizant that Roxanne, unless she was truly desperate, would never ask him for assistance. Aubrey nodded before lying back down on the bed. "I had gotten ahead of myself as the doctor told me that it wasn't anything serious." In the midst of their conversation, a knock on the ward door was heard. As the door opened, in walked Sonia with a concerned expression. She then took a seat by Aubrey's bed. "How are you feeling today? Does your arm still hurt? Did Lucian take good care of you?" Aubrey, after throwing Lucian a meek glance, answered with a cordial smile, "Yes, he did. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Farwell. I'm sure it must be tiring for you to travel back and forth from the hospital every day. Now that my injury is no longer that serious, you don't have to trouble yourself so much." Sonia protested, "That's not acceptable. I have to make sure that you're fully recovered." When Aubrey responded with a grateful smile, Sonia stroked the former's cast sympathetically. "Usually it takes about 100 days for fractures to recover. Since you'll be bored lying in the hospital all day, I don't mind dropping by to keep you company." Suddenly, when Sonia noticed the sweat beading off Aubrey's forehead, she couldn't help but worry. "Why are you sweating so much? Weren't you lying in bed the whole time? Is your arm hurting again?" Aubrey squirmed self-consciously, hoping to move her arm out of Sonia's sight. She explained softly, "I was just bored from lying down, so I climbed up the stairs just now." Upon hearing the answer, a dubious look flashed across Sonia's eyes before she turned toward her son. Lucian, unaware that Aubrey had climbed the stairs, knitted his brows in response. Nevertheless, Aubrey's excuse did sound reasonable. "Wasn't Lucian by your side?" Sonia followed up with a question. Aubrey had barely heard it when she glanced instinctively at Lucian. Her eyes sparkled vibrantly as if she was trying to find an excuse on his behalf. Sensing Aubrey's awkward position, Sonia, with a frown on her face, turned toward her son and inquired further, "Where were you when Aubrey was climbing up the stairs?" Lucian furrowed his eyebrows in silence. If he were to tell his mother the truth, she would definitely cause trouble for Roxanne. "Aubrey, tell me," Sonia instructed, knowing that it would be impossible to get it out of her son. As panic flashed across her face, Aubrey glanced at Lucian before frowning in resignation. She, after a brief hesitation, hung her head and explained, "Just now, we ran into Miss Jarvis when she brought the 2 boys to the hospital. When I noticed that her son wasn't well, it reminded me of Essie, and that caused me to worry. Hence I decided to get Lucian to check on them." As if she was worried that Sonia wasn't going to believe her, Aubrey added, "It was my idea." Lucian had no intention of going over. No sooner had she finished than she threw Lucian a knowing look, hinting to him to go along with the excuse she had made on his behalf. Sonia, who obviously didn't buy it, glowered at her son. "Is what Aubrey said true? Or did you go to check on someone else's son while she's injured?" Lucian remained silent, with his brows wrinkled tensely together. Sonia, who knew her son like the back of her palm, was aware that he was implicitly admitting to seeing Roxanne's son and denying Aubrey's claim that it was her idea for him to go. It doesn't take a genius to know that he had gone over on his own accord. The thought that her son abandoned Aubrey, who was injured in the course of saving her, outraged Sonia. "Even now, Aubrey is still trying to cover for you. But what about you? Have you ever considered her feelings before? How can you allow an injured girl like her to wander the hospital alone? What if someone knocks into her and worsens her injury? Reacting to Sonia's anger, Aubrey quickly held the former's hand and assuaged her. Mrs. Farwell, I'm fine, as my injury is almost healed. As for Miss Jarvis, being a single mother isn't an easy task. Even though she has made many mistakes, her children are innocent. Therefore, I was just as worried as Lucian was about her child. With Aubrey's considerate response, Sonia's heart warmed for the former. In fact, she wondered if Roxanne had put a curse on her son for him to be so blinded as not to see how virtuous Aubrey was. Lucian, don't you still have some unfinished work to attend to? You should get back to it while I chat with Mrs. Farwell, Aubrey suggested to Lucian in an understanding tone. Frowning at the both of them, Lucian had no intention of listening to his mother's lecture any further. Thus he turned and left, closing the door behind him. When she saw how abruptly her son left the room, the guilt Sonia felt toward Aubrey intensified. Aubrey, I'm sorry that you have to suffer through this. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Aubrey smiled flatly. It's nothing. I'm already satisfied with the way he's treating me now. Feeling indignant on Aubrey's behalf, Sonia reassured the former that she would never let Roxanne be married into their family. However, in the midst of their conversation, she noticed Aubrey's face gradually losing color. Aubrey, what's wrong? Did someone knock into your arm just now? Sonia knitted her brows with a worried look on her face. Aubrey, despite the pulsating pain in her arm, forced out a smile. No, it's my fault for not being careful. Aubrey indirectly admitted that there was something wrong with her arm. Sonia stared at Aubrey, her eyes filled with suspicion. What in the world happened? Did you really hurt yourself? She couldn't believe that Aubrey was careless after staying in the hospital for such a long time without incident. Aubrey, not daring to look Sonia in the eye, nodded while biting her lip. Sonia sprang to her feet. Come, let's get your hand examined. Just when she was about to open the door and call for Lucian, Aubrey grabbed her hand to stop her. Mrs. Farwell, it's better to keep this from him. Given how difficult it was for our relationship to finally improve, I'm worried that pressuring him might cause the situation to backfire. Sonia, after pondering for a few seconds, nodded in agreement. Subsequently, Aubrey got out of bed with Sonia's help before both of them exited the ward together. When Lucian got to his feet to follow them, Sonia threw him a glance. I'm taking Aubrey out to get some air. You should carry on with whatever you're doing. I'm not expecting you to care for her that meticulously. Lucian had no intention of arguing with his mother over something like that. After all, he saw taking care of Aubrey for the past few days as nothing more than his duty. Since his mother had relieved him of the task, he nodded in delighted relief before returning to his seat. When Sonia arrived at the orthopedic department with Aubrey, they went to see the latter's attending physician. The result of the examination triggered a drastic change in Sonia's expression. Ms. Pearson, did something knock onto your injured arm recently? Your injury seems to have worsened. The doctor furrowed his brows at the X-ray that was taken. Just when Aubrey was about to reply, Sonia preempted her. Doctor, do you think she could have hurt herself by accident? The doctor shook his head. Based on what I can see, the injury isn't caused by accident. I'm leaning toward the scenario where someone knocked into her instead. In other words, Aubrey was lying earlier. Sonia, with a sullen expression, turned toward Aubrey. Aubrey, what really happened? Who was it that hurt you? A torn look descended upon Aubrey's face. Sonia continued to stare at her. There are surveillance cameras all over the hospital. If you don't tell me, I'll check them one by one and get to the bottom of the matter sooner or later. You have gotten yourself hurt because of me. Therefore, whoever lays a finger on you is messing with me. Go ahead and tell me the truth, for I'm not going to let this matter slide. Sonia's reaction filled Aubrey with satisfaction and the sense that all the pain she had suffered was well worth it. Meeting Sonia's gaze, Aubrey admitted in a reluctant tone, "It was Miss Jarvis who accidentally pushed me, causing me to hit the wall." Nonetheless, she was in a rush to send the children home, so I could understand her urgency. Furthermore, when I didn't feel anything then, I didn't think too much of it. She kept making excuses for Roxanne. Meanwhile, the scowl on Sonia's face deepened. "It's Roxanne again. On top of seducing my son, she has even aggravated Aubrey's existing injury." And yet Aubrey continues to defend her. After learning who the perpetrator was, Sonia understood why Aubrey wanted her to keep the matter from Lucian. Aubrey clearly feels that Lucian still has feelings for Roxanne and is worried that he will blame the former instead. The thought of Aubrey's considerations made Sonia feel even more sorry for her. "Don't worry. I will definitely seek justice on your behalf." Just as she spoke, Sonia left the examination room. Aubrey hurried after her. "Mrs. Farwell, you have misunderstood. It was really an accident. She had wanted to take me for an examination but only left after I told her I was fine." Given Sonia's bias toward Roxanne, she obviously wasn't going to believe such excuses, which made Aubrey seem like a kind person. Turning around, she patted Aubrey on her hand. "Don't say another word. All you need to do is to rest for your arm to recover. Go back now and I'll come by to visit you tomorrow." With that, Sonia left in a huff. As she watched Sonia's leaving silhouette, an insidious glint flashed across Aubrey's eyes. Since it was already late when she stepped out of the hospital, Sonia headed back to the Farwell residence in spite of her anger. "I must demand an explanation from Roxanne over what happened and also give her a stern warning. As for what to say, I'll have to give it proper thought first." That night, Sonia didn't sleep a wink, for her mind was entirely occupied by the matter. The next morning, Sonia had a simple breakfast before getting the driver to send her to Roxanne's house. Meanwhile, Roxanne was having breakfast with the children. Benny, who was feeling much better after taking his medication, was enjoying his breakfast very much. When she saw how he had returned to his energetic self, Roxanne sighed to herself in relief. Just when she planned to take them to the research institute after breakfast, an unexpected guest arrived. Amidst the children having breakfast, Roxanne got up to get the door upon hearing the doorbell ring. At the sight of the visitor, Roxanne's heart sank. She turned around and instructed Lisa, "I'm going out for a while, please look after the children." Lisa acknowledged at once. The children, who were oblivious to the visitor's presence, bid Roxanne goodbye under the assumption she was going to work. By the time Roxanne turned back around after smiling at the children as if nothing had happened, all that was left was an emotionless face. "Mrs. Farwell, whatever it is, let's talk outside." Recognizing that Sonia was there with hostile intentions, Roxanne didn't want the children to be affected. After throwing her a look of contempt, Sonia returned to the car without another word. Roxanne hesitated briefly before going along with her. When the car finally stopped at a nearby cafe, Sonia maintained her silence together with a solemn look on her face. Nonetheless, Roxanne could clearly feel the animosity Sonia was exuding. "She probably wants to see me over Lucian." After both of them were seated inside the cafe, Sonia finally spoke. "I'm sure you know the reason why I'm here." Roxanne implicitly acknowledged Sonia's words with pursed lips and an indifferent stare. 6 years ago, you left the Farwell family abruptly and left behind a divorce agreement, ruining the family's reputation. Given how much time had passed since then, I no longer harbored any intention to hold you accountable for it. Unfortunately, you just had to deviously return to the country and even get involved with Lucian." Sonia's voice was exceptionally frosty. "As I have said before, you will never be part of the Farwell family. When you first got yourself entangled with Lucian, I had already warned you once. But in the end, all you did was disrespect me by continuously hounding him." Roxanne knitted her brows slightly. "Let's be clear that all my interactions with Mr. Farwell are for Essie's sake. Just like how you don't want me to be involved with him, I similarly don't want to embroil myself in any trouble. So why would I insist on hounding him? Are you saying that he's hounding you instead? Sonia gave Roxanne a mocking stare. Even if that's true, you should have known better, especially since Lucian is engaged. His future wife will never be you, for I'll never let him marry you. Sonia's words didn't come as a surprise to her. Thus, Roxanne wasn't really bothered by them. However, Sonia added, previously, I turned a blind eye to your interaction with Lucian for Essie's sake. But your attempt to harm Aubrey is something I cannot tolerate. She was injured while trying to save me, and now that she is close to full recovery after a tedious process, you chose to aggravate her injury. Roxanne, there's no way I would dare let someone as vicious as you anywhere close to Lucian. The words caused Roxanne's expression to change slightly. Aggravate her injury? Is it because of what happened last night? Even though she knew that Aubrey was putting up an act, she was still stumped for a response to defend herself. Assuming Roxanne's silence was tacit admission to the accusations, Sonia glowered even more intensely. So you had better behave, or else I don't mind sending you back to wherever you came from. In the face of Sonia's high and mighty stance, Roxanne accepted that there was no way to reverse the former's bias against her. Besides, it wouldn't be necessary, as they would no longer be related in any way. Holding that thought, Roxanne gradually calmed down and replied in a tone devoid of emotion, Mrs. Farwell, don't worry. Not everyone is interested in your son. At the very least, I'm not. Our interaction is solely based on Essie's account. Now that you have made your stand clear, I will take extra care to keep my distance from Mr. Farwell. As for Aubrey's injury, she didn't know how to prove her innocence and didn't plan on raising the matter too. Having heard Roxanne's words, Sonia scrutinized the former as if to see if she was telling the truth. Moments later, she pursed her lips coldly. Good. You had better remember what you have said today. Roxanne nodded slightly. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving now to return to my children. Anyway, that cup of coffee is on me. With that, Roxanne got up to leave before Sonia could respond. No sooner had she gotten to her feet than she saw Lucian standing outside. She wasn't aware of when he had arrived and was equally clueless as to why. All she could see was the grave-looking expression on his face. The moment their eyes met, Roxanne felt a squeeze in her heart. Averting her eyes, she swiftly suppressed the uneasiness she felt before returning her gaze to meet his. Only then did she greet him in a distant tone. Mr. Farwell. With a slight furrow of his brows, Lucian stared intently at Roxanne, who had an apathetic look on her face. He had received news first thing in the morning about his mother meeting Roxanne in a cafe from his subordinate. Cognizant of the events from the day before, he had expected his mother to confront Roxanne. Hence, he dropped whatever he was doing and rushed over without delay. Unfortunately, the last thing he expected was to hear the scathing words that came out of Roxanne's mouth. Not everyone is interested in your son. At the very least, I'm not. As the words echoed through his mind, Lucian, feeling as if he was being mocked, instinctively stopped in his tracks. 6 years ago, I was everything to her. But now she is capable of uttering something like that matter-of-factly. Staring at the distant-looking Roxanne, Lucian gulped. Your words just now, what do you mean by them? After throwing a glance at Sonia, who was sitting opposite them, Roxanne broke out a flat smile. I don't know what you have heard, but what I have just said is the truth. Given how sharp you are, I'm sure you know very well what I mean. Therefore, let's not disrupt each other's life from now on. Just as she spoke, Roxanne nodded at the two in front of her before strutting away. The moment she walked past Lucian's side, she felt a large hand grab her wrist. Roxanne, frowning intensely, lowered her voice and warned, "Let go of me." With knitted brows, Lucian stared at her while exuding an intimidating aura. Roxanne, with clenched teeth, turned around to glare at him. The instant they locked gazes, Lucian tightened his grip momentarily before slowly loosening it until her slender wrist was finally released. The resolve in her eyes told him that whatever he had to say was pointless. After recovering her gaze, Roxanne walked to the cashier to settle the bill before leaving without even looking back. Naturally, Sonia, too, heard their exchange. Nevertheless, she, having long decided to have her son marry Aubrey, had warned Roxanne off and wasn't worried that the latter would disobey. As a result, she couldn't care less about their interaction and continued to sip her coffee elegantly. When Sonia heard Roxanne's leaving footsteps, a contemptuous smile descended upon her face. Disgraceful women can always be easily frightened away. Furthermore, there's no way I'm going to allow such a woman to marry into the Farwell family. Have a seat. Sonia finally turned around to give Lucian a look as she invited him to sit. The frowning Lucian, whose eyes were burning with suppressed anger, strode up to his mother and sat down. The cup of untouched coffee in front of him was ordered by Roxanne earlier. Playing back in his mind the words she said to his mother a while ago, Lucian deepened his frown. "Waiter, please get us another cup of what I'm having." Sonia raised her hand at the waiter. "And take this cup away, please." After removing Roxanne's coffee, the waiter brought a new one for Lucian. "Why are you here? Who asked you to come?" Drinking her coffee, Sonia gave her son a leisurely look. Other than Roxanne informing him of her presence, she couldn't think of any other possibility. After all, there was no way he would have known she was there unless someone had reported it to him. However, she didn't see when Roxanne had managed to send Lucian a message. She had hardly finished speaking when she saw the increasingly gloomy look on her son's face. Sonia wrinkled her brows. "What's with that scowl of yours early in the morning? What did I do wrong? What did you see her for?" Lucian asked in a deep voice. Sonia, after scanning her son from head to toe, was visibly upset. "If you can abandon the injured Aubrey to see her, why can't I have a chat with her? Besides, didn't you hear it for yourself? She isn't interested in you at all. So why are you still angry at me on her account?" Ignoring her words, Lucian pressed on with his questions. "What did you say to her just now?" He chose to believe that his mother's words had triggered Roxanne's frigid response. Upon hearing her son's question, Sonia glowered instantly. "I was just stating the truth to her. Yet she complained to you so that you would come here and flash that snarky attitude of yours at me. To a woman like that, nothing I say can ever be considered too much." After giving Sonia a look, Lucian refuted her in a low voice, "She didn't call me here." "Why would I believe you?" Sonia's expression was filled with disdain. What Lucian was about to say next would devastate her. "My men have been keeping an eye on her. It was they who informed me about both of you being here." Lucian related the truth with an expressionless face. Filled with disbelief, Sonia stared at him for a long time to ascertain if she had heard him wrongly. "What's so good about her? Don't forget what she has done to the Farwell family and Essie." Sonia slammed the table furiously. "I don't care what you have in mind before this, but you must withdraw your men right now. From today onward, both of you are forbidden to contact each other. For goodness sake, you're going to marry Aubrey in the future. What will happen when word of this gets out?" Despite Sonia's outburst, Lucian met her gaze firmly. "Let me repeat myself. This is between her and me, and I will resolve it myself. Therefore, you should stop interfering in this matter." Sonia's heart sank when she looked at Lucian's expression. She knew her son too well. The more calm and collected he looks, the more determined he is. It was also not the first time Lucian had warned her not to intervene in his relationship with Roxanne. Sonia did not understand why Roxanne held a special place in her son's heart. "I can't believe my son would give me attitude because of that woman." Sonia knitted her brows. After calming herself down for a minute, she gritted her teeth and questioned him, "What do you take Aubrey for? Aubrey has been waiting for you for so long, and now you want to get rid of her? What did she not do well? Do you think Roxanne can do better than her? Did you forget how the heartless woman dumped Essie? Aubrey was the one who raised Essie with you. Not only did she take good care of Essie, but she also respected the elders in the family. What else could you ask for? Lucian's eyes turned cold. You sure everything she did had no issues? Upon hearing that, Sonia froze for a moment and doubted her judgment for a few seconds. But after recalling everything Aubrey did and how she cared for the family over the years, Sonia steadied herself and nodded matter-of-factly. Have you ever wondered why Essie refuses to accept Aubrey even after so many years for no apparent reason? Lucian continued asking in a deep voice. His question rendered Sonia speechless once again. She then patiently defended Aubrey by explaining to Lucian, Aubrey said she likes kids but didn't have much experience dealing with them. Of course, she'll make mistakes along the way. But once she spends enough time with the kid, I'm sure their relationship will improve. She then shot a glare at Lucian and expressed her dismay. How many times have I told you to let Essie spend more time with Aubrey? Yet you choose to keep Essie by your side. Lucian could not help but smirk. He knew there was no point in engaging in this argument with his mother. No matter how he explained, he knew she would put the blame on him and put in good words for Aubrey. So you're saying I don't have a choice but to marry Aubrey? Sonia bobbed her head in disbelief. You can't let her down. She has waited for you for years. Lucian threw another question, what if I refuse? Sonia frowned as she was unhappy with his reaction. Besides Aubrey, who else could you marry? Roxanne? Listen carefully. I'll not allow her to step into the family, so stop dreaming. Aubrey got severely wounded when she saved me. You have to marry her because she's our benefactor. Lucian continued to look at his mother with a deadpan expression. An awkward silence ensued. Besides, Roxanne said she was not interested in you. She might not agree to marry you even if you insist. Sonia continued to dampen Lucian's spirit. Lucian's brows creased, but he steadied himself. I wouldn't marry Aubrey even if Roxanne turned down my proposal. Upon hearing that, a vortex of anger swirled in Sonia. She clenched the coffee cup tightly to avoid throwing a fit in the cafe. I'm indebted to the Pearson family, but Farwell Group has done everything we could throughout the years to repay their kindness. As for all the sacrifices she'd made for you, that's between you two. I can look after her during her recuperation period and find her the best doctor to make sure the wounds do not leave a permanent scar, but that's just it. I can't do anything more than this, Lucian said. In other words, Lucian would not tie the knot with Aubrey. Sonia could not help but massage her temples while shooting daggers at her son. Did you come here this early in the morning just to upset me? Lucian remained unperturbed. I can send you to the hospital if you're feeling unwell, but there's no way you can force me to marry Aubrey. Both mother and son kept mum for some time. Sonia waved her hand and gestured for him to leave. Go. Get out of my sight. Lucian nodded. Before leaving, he said, I've stationed a few men by the door. Call them if you need their help. Before Sonia could react, Lucian had left the cafe. Heading back to the office now, Mr. Farwell? The driver asked with respect when Lucian got into the car. Lucian knitted his brows. Roxanne's house flashed across his mind. I wonder how she's doing now. Did she mean what she said just now? Lucian went deep in thought but eventually snapped out of it. He replied to the driver, back to the office. The car started moving slowly and headed in the direction of Farwell Group. Caden had waited for him in the office the entire morning. When Lucian got out of the elevator, he immediately walked up and greeted him. I have updates for you, Mr. Farwell. Lucian's eyes darkened. Did you manage to find the driver? Not yet, but we found the car, Caden replied. We went through the footage of the surveillance cameras at all the junctions and finally mapped out the car's route after it left the parking lot. The driver took the car to the suburbs, and my men were able to locate the car after a thorough search at a junkyard. After entering Lucian's office and closing the door properly, Caden looked at the man and continued, the black car's registration number is fake and it doesn't have an owner. The car should have been disposed of at the junkyard, but the culprit drove off and committed crimes with the vehicle. From the footage, we saw the driver had his face covered. I believe everything that had happened was not an accident. Lucian nodded in agreement upon hearing his updates. Caden is right. It's obvious that the driver was familiar with the route. Sending the car to a junkyard right after the incident could also be one of the ways to destroy the evidence. What should we do next, Mr. Farwell? We've investigated this for a few days, and that's all we got for now. Who do you think the culprit could be? The information Caden had obtained was limited, and there were no other leads either. The cops did not know what else they could do since the driver had fully covered his face. Caden came all the way to give Lucian the updates because he wanted the latter to advise him on the next course of action. After all, only Lucian knew what to do if it was a personal grudge between him and the culprit. After keeping mum for a moment, he ordered, "Investigate all the companies that have borne grudges against Farwell Group." At that time, only Sonia and Aubrey were in the parking lot, and it seemed like the driver had marked Sonia as his target when he drove in her direction. Lucian believed his mother would not offend anyone in the first place. The culprit must be one of my business rivals. Caden nodded in acknowledgement and immediately made the necessary arrangements. Due to Benny's health, although he felt better after taking his medicine, Roxanne was still worried, so she got him excused from school to rest at home. Archie also stayed home to accompany him. Meanwhile, having not seen the two brothers in kindergarten for 2 days in a row, let alone Roxanne, Estella became very depressed. Originally, with Archie and Benny acting as examples, the children in the class would take her along to play. However, because of her aversion in the past 2 days, they also began to alienate her again. After class, Estella often sprawled on her desk, pouting while staring at Archie and Benny's seats, hoping they would suddenly appear in their seats. "What are you doing, Estella?" A kid could not suppress his curiosity anymore, so he came over and asked her. Estella, however, seemed to have not heard his voice and carried on clawing at the table. "Come and play with us," he invited. On the side, someone called out to him in a childish voice, "Ignore her, Yoel. Estella won't play with us." Yoel looked at Estella with some hesitation. As early as before Archie and Benny came, he often invited Estella to play with him. At that time, although Estella did not pay much attention to him, she would still have some reactions when she heard him speak, and sometimes she would write and chat with him. However, these 2 days, no matter what he said, she still acted as though she could not hear his voice. The boy felt that her behavior was very strange and was a little worried about her. Seeing his hand reaching over, Estella finally reacted, frowning and dodging it in displeasure. Yoel's eyes lit up. Thinking that Estella was playing with him, he reached out again to grab her arm. Estella slapped his hand away with a loud smack. Many children around heard the noise, and when they saw Estella hitting Yoel, they all gathered around and reprimanded her in outrage. "Children can't hit people." Estella apologized to Yoel now. Estella didn't react until after hitting him, but she also felt very aggrieved. By dodging his hand earlier, she was already telling him that she did not want him to touch her. Yet he still wanted to come over and touch her. She only hit him because she felt uncomfortable with it. The back of Yoel's hand was all red, and he was momentarily stunned. "I just wanted to play with her. Why did she hit me?" "Estella, apologize now, or we'll go tell the teacher," someone warned while standing with arms akimbo. Very soon others chimed in. Estella looked at the aggressive looks of the children around her before shifting her gaze to the empty seats of Archie and Benny, feeling aggrieved with reddened eyes. "If they were here, they would definitely speak up for me." Thinking of the days when she was protected by the brothers and remembering how distant Roxanne was from her and her father during that period, she felt a sense of fear that Archie and Benny might never come back. At that thought, Estella cried out in anguish. When they saw her crying, the children were startled and fell silent, looking at each other in bafflement. They only intended to seek justice for Yoel. Moreover, apologizing after hitting someone was the right thing to do. However, they did not expect Estella to cry as though she had been wronged. Everyone felt puzzled, but seeing that she was crying so hard, they did not dare to say anything. The class bell rang and the children returned to their seats, feeling guilty. Nevertheless, Estella's tears continued to flow uncontrollably, looking distraught. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.